Book of Heaven, Volume 6, Part 4. April 29th, 1904. The divine life manifests itself in creatures, through words, through works, and through sufferings. But what manifests it more clearly are the sufferings. Continuing in my usual state, I found myself surrounded by 3 virgins, who took me and wanted to crucify me on a cross by sheer force. But since I did not see blessed Jesus, fearing, I resisted them. On seeing my resistance, they told me, "Dearest sister, do not fear that our spouse is not here. Allow us to begin crucifying you. For the Lord, drawn by the virtue of sufferings, shall come. We are coming from heaven, and since we have seen most grave evils about to happen in Europe, we have come to make you suffer, so that at least they might be milder." In the meantime, they pierced my hands and feet through with the nails, but with such cruelty of pain that I felt I was dying. Now, while I was suffering, blessed Jesus came, and looking at me with severe eyes, he told me, "Who commanded you to put yourself in these sufferings? Of what use are you to me then? To make me unable even to be free to do what I want, and to be a continuous hindrance to my justice?" In my interior I said, "What does he want from me? I did not want this either. They have been the ones who induced me, and he gets upset with me." But I could not speak because of the bitterness of the pain. On seeing the severity of our Lord, those virgins made me suffer more, pulling the nails out and then driving them in again, and they brought me closer to him, showing him my sufferings. The more I suffered, the more it seemed that the Lord was appeased. And when they saw him more appeased, and almost moved by my suffering, they left me and went away, leaving me alone with our Lord. Then he himself assisted me and sustained me, and in seeing me suffer, to cheer me, he told me, "My daughter, my life manifests itself in the creatures through words, through works, and through sufferings. But what manifests it more clearly are the sufferings." In the meantime, the confessor came to call me to obedience, but partly because of the sufferings, partly because the Lord would not leave me, I was unable to obey. So I lamented to my Jesus, telling him, "Lord, how come the confessor is here at this hour? Why did he have to come right now?" And he, "My daughter, let him be with us for a while, and also participate in my graces. When one frequents a house continuously, he participates in its crying and in its laughter, in its poverty and in its riches." The same for the confessor. Has he not participated in your mortifications and privations? Now he participates in my presence. And it seemed that he communicated divine fortitude to him, telling him, "The life of God in the soul is hope, and the more you hope, the more of the divine life you contain within yourself. And since divine life contains power, wisdom, fortitude, love, the soul feels herself as though being watered by as many streams, for as many as are the divine virtues. And so the divine life keeps growing within you. But if you do not hope, both in spiritual things and through the spiritual, the corporal too shall participate. The divine life shall be gradually consumed until it is completely extinguished. Therefore, hope. Hope always. Then I was just barely able to receive communion, and afterwards I found myself outside of myself, and I saw 3 men in the shape of 3 untamed horses, raging throughout Europe, making a great bloody slaughter. It seemed that they wanted to ensnare most of Europe in fierce wars, as though inside a net. All were trembling at the sight of those incarnate devils, and many were destroyed by them. May 1st, 1904. The eye that delights only in the things of heaven has the virtue of seeing Jesus, while the one who delights in the things of the earth has the virtue of seeing the things of the earth. As I was in my usual state, I was thinking about our Lord at the moment when, as he reached the top of Mount Calvary, he was completely stripped and was embittered with gall. And I was praying to him, saying, "My adorable Lord, I see in you but a garment of blood adorned with wounds. As your taste and pleasure, I see bitternesses of gall, and as honor and glory, I see confusion, opprobriums, and crosses. Oh, please, do not permit, after you have suffered so much, that I look at the things of this earth as anything other than dung and mud, that I take any other pleasure but in you alone, and that all my honor be anything else but the cross." And he, making himself seen, told me, "My daughter, if you did otherwise, you would lose the purity of eye, and as a veil would form before your sight, you would lose the good of seeing me. In fact, the eye that delights only in the things of heaven has the virtue of seeing me, while one who delights in the things of the earth has the virtue of seeing the things of the earth, because his eye, in seeing them as different from what they are, sees them and loves them." May 28th, 1904. Mortification knocks everything down and immolates everything to God. Continuing in my usual state, and with highest bitterness, because of the continuous privations of my adorable Jesus, he made himself seen for just a little, telling me, "My daughter, the first bomb that must be primed in the interior of the soul is mortification. When this bomb is thrown into the soul, it knocks everything down and immolates everything to God. In fact, in the soul there are as though many palaces, but all of vices, such as pride, disobedience, along with many other vices. And the bomb of mortification, knocking everything down, rebuilds as many other palaces of virtues, immolating them and sacrificing them all to the glory of God." Having said this, he disappeared. A little later, the devil came, who just wanted to molest me. And I, without becoming fearful, said to him, "Why do you want to molest me? If you want to show how brave you are, take a rod and beat me up to the point of leaving me not even one drop of blood, provided, however, that each drop of blood I shed be one more proof of love, of reparation, and of glory that I intend to give to my God." And he, I don't have a rod with me to be able to beat you, and if I go fetch one, you shall not wait for me. And I, go ahead, I will be waiting for you here. So he went off, and I remained with the firm intention of waiting for him. But to my surprise I saw that, as he met with another demon, the two were saying, "It is useless for us to go back. Why should we beat her, if this must serve to harm us, and as a loss for us? It is good to make suffer one who does not want to suffer, because he would offend God. But if one wants to suffer, we would do harm to ourselves with our own hands." So he did not come back, and I was left mortified. May 30th, 1904. The Passion serves as garment for man. Pride transforms the images of God into demons. Finding myself in my usual state, I was thinking about and offering the Passion of our Lord, especially the crown of thorns, and I was praying that he would give light to so many blinded minds, and that he would make himself known, because it is impossible to know you and not to love you. While I was saying this, my adorable Jesus came out from within my interior and told me, "My daughter, how much ruin pride causes in souls. It is enough to tell you that it forms a wall of division between the creature and God, and from many images of me, it transforms them into demons. And then, if the fact that creatures are so blinded that they themselves do not understand nor see the abyss they are in, grieves you and saddens you so much, and you take so much to heart that I help them, my passion serves as garment for man, that covers his greatest miseries, embellishes him, and gives back to him all the good of which he had deprived himself and had lost because of sin. So I give it to you as gift, that you may use it for yourself and for whomever you want." On hearing this, a great fear came to me in seeing the greatness of the gift, fearing that I might not be capable of using this gift, and therefore I might displease the giver. So I said, "Lord, I do not feel the strength to accept such a gift. I am too unworthy of such a favor. It is better if you keep it, for you are everything and know everything, and you know to whom it is necessary and appropriate to apply this garment so precious and of immense value. But I, poor one, what can I know? And if it is necessary to apply it to someone, and I do not do it, what a strict account would you not ask of me?" And Jesus, "Do not fear, for the giver himself shall give you the grace not to keep the gift he has given you as useless. Can you believe that I would give you a gift to do you harm? Never." I did not know what to answer, but I remained frightened and suspended, intending to hear what Lady Obedience thought about it. It is understood, however, that this garment wants to signify nothing other than all that our Lord operated, earned, and suffered, in which the creature finds the garment to cover her nakedness, stripped of virtues, and riches with which to enrich herself, beauties to render herself beautiful and to embellish herself, and the remedy for all her evils. Then, as I told this to obedience, he told me that I should accept. June 3rd, 1904. The cross destroys 3 evil kingdoms and constitutes 3 good kingdoms in the soul. This morning, since Blessed Jesus was not coming, I felt all oppressed and tired. Then when he came, he told me, "My daughter, do not want to become tired in suffering, but rather act as if at each hour you were just beginning to suffer. In fact, if the soul lets herself be dominated by the cross destroys 3 evil kingdoms in her, which are the world, the devil, and the flesh. And it constitutes in her 3 more good kingdoms, the spiritual, the divine, and the eternal kingdom." And he disappeared. June 6, 1904. It takes courage, fidelity, and greatest attention to follow what the divinity operates within us. Continuing in my usual state, he made himself seen for a little from within my interior. First himself alone, and then all 3 divine persons, but they were all in profound silence. I continued my usual interior work in their presence, and it seemed that the sun would unite with me, and I would do nothing but follow him. But everything was silence, and in this silence I would do nothing but identify myself with God, and my whole interior, my affections, heartbeats, desires, breaths, would become profound adorations to the Supreme Majesty. Then, after spending some time in this state, it seemed that all 3 of them were speaking, though one single voice was formed, and they said to me, "Our beloved daughter, courage, fidelity, and greatest attention in following what the divinity operates in you, because everything you do, it is not you who does it, but you do nothing other than give the divinity your soul as residence. It happens to you as to a poor woman who had a little hovel, and the king asks for it as his residence, and she gives it to him and does everything the king wants. So, since the king resides in that little hovel, it contains riches, nobility, glory, and all goods. But to whom do they belong? To the king. And if the king wants to leave, what remains to the poor one? She is left always with her poverty. June 10th, 1904. The beauty of man and his blindness with regard to himself. Continuing in my usual state, my adorable Jesus came for just a little, all sad and sorrowful, and he told me, "Ah, my daughter, if man knew himself, oh, how careful he would be not to become stained. In fact, his beauty, his nobility, his strikingness are such and so great that he encompasses all the beauties and varieties of the created things within himself. And this, because all other things of nature had been created to serve man, and man was to be superior to all of them. So in order to be superior, he had to encompass all the qualities of the other created things within himself. Not only this, But since the other things had been created for man, and man for God alone, and for his delight, as a consequence, he was not only to encompass all creation within himself, but he was to surpass it to the point of receiving the image of the Supreme Majesty within himself. But in spite of all this, heedless of all these goods, man does nothing but dirty himself with the ugliest filth. And he disappeared. I understood that it happens to us as to a poor woman who received a garment woven with gold and enriched with gems and precious pearls. But since she knows little about these things and does not know their value, she keeps the garment exposed to dust. She easily lets it get dirty with mud, and she holds it as she would a rough and inexpensive dress, so much so that if it is taken away from her, she suffers little or no displeasure. Such is our blindness with regard to ourselves. June 15th, 1904. The creature is nothing but a little container filled with a dose of all the divine particles. As I was in my usual state, he came for just a little and told me, "My beloved daughter, the creature is so dear to me, and I love her so much, that if the creature could comprehend this, her heart would explode with love. This is so true, that in creating her, I made her as nothing but a little container, filled with a dose of all the divine particles, in such a way that of all my being, attributes, virtues, perfections, the soul contains many little particles, according to the capacity given to her by me. And this, so that I might find in her as many little notes corresponding to my notes, and thus be able to delight perfectly and play with her. Now, when the soul deals with material things, and lets them enter into this little container filled with the divine, something of the divine flows outside of it, and something of matter enters to take its place. What an affront the divinity receives, and what harm for the soul! How much attention it takes so as not to let material things enter inside, if by necessity she has to deal with them. You, my daughter, be attentive. Otherwise, if I see anything that is not divine in you, I won't make myself seen any more. June 17th, 1904. The consummation of the human will in the divine renders the soul one with God, and places the divine power in her hands. This morning, after I struggled very much, blessed Jesus came and told me, "My daughter, see how many things are said about virtue, about perfection, but they all end up in one single point. That is, the consummation of the human will in the divine. So the more one is consumed in it, the more it can be said that he contains everything and is more perfect than everyone. In fact, all virtues and good works are many keys that open the divine treasures and make one acquire more friendship, more intimacy, more commerce with God. But consummation alone is what renders the soul one with him and places the divine power in her hands. And this, because life must have a will in order to live, and by living of the divine will, one naturally takes ownership. June 19th, 1904. Sorrowful times for the Church. The glory of the athletic spirits. As I was in my usual state, I felt my adorable Jesus near me, saying, "My daughter, what a sorrowful stage the Church is about to enter. But all the glory in these times is of those athletic spirits who, heedless of shackles, chains, and pains, do nothing but break the thorny path that divides the society from God." Then he added, "One can see greed for human blood in man, he from the earth, and I shall concur from heaven with earthquakes, fires, hurricanes, calamities, such as to make a good part of them die." June 20th, 1904. Victim souls are the daughters of mercy. After I struggled very much, blessed Jesus came for just a little and told me, "My daughter, human perfidy has reached such a point as to exhaust my mercy on its part. But my goodness is so great as to constitute daughters of mercy, so that on the part of creatures also this attribute may not be exhausted. These are the victims who are in full ownership of the divine will, having destroyed their own. In fact, in these souls, the container given by me in creating them is in full vigor, and since they have received the particle of my mercy, being daughters, they administer it to others. It is understood, however, that in order to be able to administer the particle of my mercy to others, they themselves must be in justice. And I, Lord, who can ever be in justice? And he, the one who does not commit grave sins, and abstains from committing the slightest venial sins of his own will. June 29th, 1904. The sign to know when God withdraws from the soul. This morning, as I was in my usual state, my adorable Jesus made himself seen for just a little and told me, "My daughter, the sign to know when my justice can no longer bear man, and is in the act of sending grave chastisements, is that man can no longer bear himself. In fact, rejected by man, God withdraws from him and makes him feel all the weight of his nature, of sin, of miseries. And man, unable to bear the weight of his nature without divine help, seeks himself the way to destroy himself. Such is the state the present generation is now in." July 14th, 1904. Life is a continuous consummation. My days are becoming more and more sorrowful because of the almost continuous privations of my adorable Jesus. I myself do not know why I feel my soul, and also my body, being devoured by this separation. What a relentless, consuming torment! My only and sole comfort is the will of God, because if I have lost everything, and also Jesus, this holy and most sweet will of God alone is in my power. Also, feeling that my body too is being devoured, I flatter myself that it shall not take too long for it to melt, because I see that I feel it succumb. And therefore I hope that one day or another the Lord may call me to himself and end this ruthless separation. Then this morning, after much struggling, oh, how much, he came for just a little and told me, "My daughter, life is a continuous consummation. Some consume it for pleasures, some for creatures, some for sinning, others for interests, some for whims. There are many kinds of consummation. Now the one who forms this consummation all in God can say with all certainty, 'Lord, my life has been consumed with love for you, and I have not only consumed myself, but I have died for love of you alone.' Therefore, if you feel yourself being consumed continuously because of my separation, you can say that you are dying continuously in me, and that you suffer many deaths for love of me. And if you consume your being for me, as great as the consummation of yourself is, so much do you acquire of the divine within yourself." You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 6, Part 4. Fiat.